do I is for you as it has been for me. Open your heart and know this in your soul. Our hopes, our dreams are the same. My vow to you, I will finish this race, not alone by myself, but with you. Though tough times come, I will not waver. We will rise and we conquer new ground. We will stand up and rise together. We will march into victory. Hold my hand and we say we know I do right, it's for you as it has been for me. Everyone shine. All of us there for a reason, for a leader we shine. We will stand up and rise together. We will march into victory. Hold my hand and let's say we know I do right, it's for you as it has been for me. We will stand up and rise together. We will march into victory. Hold my hand and let's say we know I do right, it's for you as it has been for me.
I. W. Hey.
GUI.
July. 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 Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to IQI Friday Prop Talk. My name is Lee and I'm the Sales and Marketing Manager at IQI and I am your host this evening. I got some feedback from our audience that the live seems a little bit laggy. So if that's the case, please excuse us. Hopefully the line will get a little bit better as we go. And yeah, once again, welcome everyone to IQI WA Friday Prop Talk. We are broadcasting live from Perth, the number 6 most livable city in the world according to the Global Livability Index 2021. So Perth is the only Australian city made to the top 10 this year. So we are very happy and very proud of that. And Perth is also the only city on the top 10 list that actually score a perfect score, which is 100% in 3 of the categories. There are healthcare, education, and infrastructure. So why would you want to live in Perth or study here? Anyway, before I go on, I'm not sure if you have noticed that our live looks a little bit different today from how we normally would, and a little bit fancier and a little bit more professional perhaps. And yes, we are. We are on StreamYard today. So this is our first time trying StreamYard. So if there is any technical difficulty or we look a little bit clumsy, please excuse us. And I also would like to take this opportunity to thank our IQI marketing and IT team back in Malaysia for helping us make this happen in such a short notice. Like I think we only give them like 48 hours, so they came up with all these things to run StreamYard this evening. So thank you everyone for your help and your support. Okay, now before I introduce our speaker tonight, allow me to give you a little quick introduction on who we are at IQI and what do we do. So IQI stands for International Quality Investment, and we are international cross-border real estate network with more than 21,000 agents now across 21 countries. And we are the member of July IQI. Now, the IQI network is incredibly unique, where all of the IQI offers around the world are in fact connected and we actually work with each other. So we are truly global in the sense that we actually market and sell property cross-border, which means as an agent here in Australia, for example, through my super app, the app that created by IQI, I can actually access all the stock through my apps, the mobile apps, through all the project and development around the world, all our IQI global offices. So I can actually sell this development or project to my investor. And likewise, they can actually look up and sell Australian property as well from another country. And our ultimate goal is to empower our investor to become global and global residents and transform our buyer into international investor. And now, who is IQIWA? So IQIWA is the Australian branch, and we're based in Perth here. And we are sales and marketing real estate. We specialize in off-the-plan project marketing mostly, also brand new house and land packages as well. And in addition to that, we also do sub-sale secondary market now. So if you are looking to sell your property, do get in touch. Anyway, if you would like to find out more about IQI and our services, whether you are buyer, seller, or developer, leave us a comment below in our Facebook Live, and one of us will get in touch with you. Or our contact details is actually on the screen now, so feel free to take down our contact details. All right, I think I have talked enough, and tonight you are here because of these very attractive topics that we're going to talk about, which is skill migration. And I'm sure things have changed a lot since I first, have that experience with skill migration. That's why we have invited Kenny to give us some update, and things do change quite regularly. So yeah, let me introduce our speaker tonight, Kenny G. He is an Australian registered migration agent for over 20 years now. And a few years after graduating from Edith University, Kenny started his migration profession, which is back in 2002. And yeah, Kenny, that's about the time that I started to work as well. So I know your age, you know my age. Now, in 2005, Kenny set up his own migration consultancy in Perth, which is Eminence Migration Services. So Kenny since has helped over hundreds of individuals and their families to get residency in Australia. Later on, their Australian citizenship as well. And Kenny specialized in most migration visa, so including business migration, family, and employer-sponsored visa. And he is multilingual as well, which make a lot of make many people make job easier, I should say. So he can speak fluently in English, Mandarin, and Cantonese. And how about Malay, Kenny? Boleh kah?
A little bit, not as much, but I'm learning gradually.
Yeah, learning. Good evening, Kenny. Thank you for joining us this evening. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, like what I explained to everyone before the show, this is the first time we try StreamYard. So yeah, we might be a bit clumsy, and our most helpful Priscilla behind the screen will make sure everything goes clear. So if anything happens, please excuse us. Yeah. So Kenny, I believe there has been a lot of new update about skill migration to Perth.
That is correct. And I'll go through all that to try to explain to our audience regarding the changes that has been introduced since July.
Yeah, and I guess since COVID in the last a year and a half, I think Perth is actually really on the worst stage now, isn't it? We manage our COVID so well that now we just live like a normal life. We don't need to wear masks. We go out freely. There's no number restriction, and we basically almost back to the pre-COVID lifestyle. So we are very, very lucky. And with that said, I have noticed that we are getting a lot more inquiry. I'm sure you probably do as well with your migration. We do get a lot of inquiry about people want to move back to Perth, like people who actually work or new migrant planning to come here as well with the family. And interestingly enough, I also get a lot of inquiry from over the eastern state. Yeah. So yeah, I think when our border opens, I think we will be busy, you and I.
Correct. Yeah. No,
that is a good news. All right. Before I keep on going, I'm aware that you have a PowerPoint that you would like to share with us this evening.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. And I gave a brief introduction about you and your company. So feel free to add on if there's anything else that I have missed out. Yeah.
No problem. Okay, well, thank you, Leanne. Well, good evening, everyone. Now, by the way, before I start, Leanne, if you do have any questions or any of our audience have any question, if they type out their questions, feel free to interrupt me and then you can ask me on the spot. Okay? Or if not, you can always leave it to after the presentation, which I can then answer your question as well. But I'm quite flexible, so it doesn't matter. Okay.
Yeah. Now, I think what I'll do, I'll keep the question and then I'll ask you at the end. Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Okay. So now, first of all, thank you to Juwai IQI for providing me with the opportunity to present tonight, and of course to you, Leanne, for hosting the session, as well as to Lily and the team from IQI WA for their constant support to make tonight's presentation possible. Okay, now let's start with the presentation. So, as some of you may know, there are a number of visa pathways that a person can apply to come to Australia, which includes employer-sponsored visa, business visa, skill visa, and family visa. Tonight, I'm actually going to be solely concentrating on talking about the migration opportunity to come to, especially to WA, under the skill migration pathway. Okay, as you can see on the screen, I'm just giving you a quick rundown. Under the skill visa pathway, there are also a number of different visas that a person can utilize as well. You have the skill independent visa, which is the 189. It's a permanent visa. You have got the skilled nominated 190 visa, which basically are the one that is going to be sponsored by an Australian government. And this is the one that obviously I'm going to talk about tonight, as well as also the skill regional 491 visa, which is a temporary visa and also requires to be sponsored by an Australian state government or a family member. And once a person has got this 491 visa, they can also move on to apply for a permanent 191 visa in future, which that 191 visa will come into effect after November 2022. So tonight, I'm actually going to be concentrating talking more about the 190 as well as the 491 visa being sponsored by the WA state government. And then also under the skill visa pathway, there are also other visas such as the 186 visa, which is an employer-sponsored visa. Again, it is a permanent visa, followed by the 494 skill employer-sponsored regional visa, which is a temporary visa. And it also then allows a person to hold this visa to work for at least, let's say, 3 years in a state, and then they can apply for the PR visa later. And then also under the skill visa pathway as well, there is also the global talent visa program, which is for highly skilled people to apply. Now, some people might ask tonight's presentation, why am I focusing on talking about WA only? This 190 and the 491 visa is actually available to every Australian states, where each of the Australian state government have their own requirements, which a visa applicant needs to meet in order to be eligible to be nominated by the state. And a lot of times, the requirement will include things like you have to be staying in the state, or you have studied in the state, or you have been working in the state. Okay. Now, because tonight I'm going to be concentrating solely on WA, I guess I also would probably be fair to the other state. I just want a quick mention in regards to basically why am I choosing to use WA compared to the other states. Okay. For example, for New South Wales, you have to be currently employed in New South Wales in order to be eligible to apply for the 190 visa to be nominated by the New South Wales state government. Okay, you have to be working there, you have to be living there. Or if you're applying for the 491 visa, then you have to be working and living in regional New South Wales for at least 12 months before you're eligible to be nominated by them. Or you have studied for at least 2 years in a regional New South Wales. For Victoria, you must be currently living and working in Victoria in a target sector in order to apply for the 190 visa, as well as the 491 visa. Now, what it means by target sector is that at the moment, for Victoria, they basically only nominate people who has got occupation working within the science, technology, engineering, and medicine in those kind of skill set. And then for Queensland at the moment, the state government is currently closed. They're not nominating anyone at the moment until further notice. Now, of course, there are Northern Territory, there's ACT, there's Tasmania, there's South Australia. Again, each of them have their own requirement as well. But as you can see, there is actually quite difficult for a person in order to apply to get state nomination for each of these Australian states. I'm not saying that WA state government is a much easier pathway. Basically, all I'm saying is because of the recent changes for WA state government, where they have introduced a list of additional occupation onto the state list where they're willing to sponsor, it is a pathway where a person may consider to come to WA, for example, to study here, and so that they can apply to get a state nomination to be sponsored by the WA state government to help them to apply for the PR visa in future. I will go to that basically later. Okay, now, so if under this table, basically you can see that what I have done is this is what I've got from the immigration website just recently. This is the invitation for what immigration has invited for applicant to apply for the 189 visa. Now, some people may ask, why are we talking about the 190 or the 491 compared to the independent skill 189 visa? Basically, the 189 visa is no longer an attractive option nowadays because the immigration department is getting very selective in regards to what sort of occupation they wish to invite a person to apply for the PR, especially under the independent skill 189 visa. Hence, that's the reason why a lot of visa applicants or potential migrants now are looking at option where they would like to prefer to get nominated by a state government or basically being sponsored by an employer, for example, in order to achieve their migration dream. Okay, so the general requirement, first of all, before I even talk about the requirement required for the WA state government to sponsor a person, I am going to explain to you first the general requirement which a person needs to satisfy for the immigration side of it in order to apply for the visa. So the first thing is they must submit an expression of interest, an EOI, meaning they have to basically make sure they got enough points. They have to make sure that they can be nominated by an Australian state government. And they also need to make sure that they have got a suitable skill assessment for their nominated occupation. And most important thing is also they must be under 45 years old when they receive the invitation to apply for the visa. And you must also be able to score 65 points and above. Okay, now bear in mind, this general requirement that I've just mentioning is for the 190 and the 491 state-sponsored visa. Okay, so that's the reason why you must score at least 65 points. If you're talking about the 189 visa, the points that you need to get is going to be much higher. Okay, now at the time of the invitation, you must also have at least competent English, and then you must be invited by Immigration or Department of Home Affairs, which we commonly know as DHA, to apply for either the 190 or the 491 visa. Okay, so these requirements are basically the general requirement for immigration where a person would be eligible to apply for the 190 or the 491 visa. Of course, there are the individual set of requirements by the individual state government where you need to satisfy as well in order to get a state government sponsorship or the nomination from a state government. So now this next page, just to give you an idea of basically from the WA side. From now, I'm going to be basically talking about the WA state government nomination. If you can see, this is the first invitation result that has been issued on the 22nd of July in the new financial year, you can see that under the stream schedule 1 and the schedule 2 and the graduate schedule, because basically there are 3 pathways for the WA in order to get state nomination from them. Your occupation has to be either under schedule 1, where there is a set of requirement, which I'll touch on and explain later. There is also a schedule 2 occupation list, followed by a graduate stream list. Okay. Now, if you can see on the figure here, for example, for a 190 visa, at the moment in July, the WA state government has only invited or nominated 65 applicants. And under the Schedule 2, they have nominated 14 people, followed by a graduate stream. There is about 232 people that they have nominated. So the graduate stream is for people who have studied and graduated in WA, and then they proceed to request for the state government to give them the nomination. Okay, and this is basically where I'll probably most likely be touching base on in regards to explaining how a person, if they want to think about migrating to Australia, and yet they don't run a business, they are working at the moment, but they still lack the skill set and they want to improve the skill, they're thinking of going back to study, it will be a perfect opportunity for those people who then apply for a student visa to come to WA, to study in WA for at least 2 years. Provided their occupation is on the skill list, then they can perhaps look at being sponsored by the state government in order to apply for the PR visa later. Now, if you also look at the 491 visa, for the state government, they have invited 57 people in July, and then they have invited 286 people in July. So what this whole thing means is, at this point of time, to my understanding, it looks like the WA state government is probably much happier to nominate someone who's going to be applying for the 491 visa first. So they want people to work in WA for at least 3 years before they can apply for the PR. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, if you apply for the 491 visa, you are almost, and you get that 491 visa, as long as you work and stay and live in WA, you're almost on the pathway to be able to apply for your PR visa for under the 191 visa up in 3 years' time. Same as the graduate as well, under the 190, where 190 is a permanent visa. So if you study and graduate here, you can actually apply and get your 190 visa. There is a higher chance of you getting that visa, because if you can look from that chart, the state government is basically happy to sponsor more people under the graduate stream. Okay, so now what we're doing is we'll move on to giving an overview of each of the 3 streams that I spoke about under the WA state sponsorship. There is the Schedule 1 stream, there is the Schedule 2 stream, and there is the graduate stream. Okay, and I will explain to you here the differences between trying to apply for WA state nomination under each of these 3 streams. Now, the first thing you can see here is under this requirement, where if you want to apply to get WA state nomination under all 3 streams, you must currently reside in Australia. Okay, so what it is saying is the WA state government is not going to nominate a person if the person is currently living offshore. So in order to get a chance to apply for or to get a nomination for the WA, you must be staying and residing in Australia. Not necessarily in WA, but you must be residing in Australia. So that means if someone who is planning to migrate to Australia in future under the WA state government, they cannot just get a tourist visa to come here on a short-term basis and try to hope to get WA state government endorsement or nomination. They must get a longer-term visa, something like maybe perhaps a student visa or even a work visa, and then to come to Australia, preferably to come to WA to stay here in WA in order to have at least a chance to be sponsored by the WA state government like in future. Okay. Now, the next requirement is you must meet the minimum English requirement for all 3 streams. So, if your occupation is on a professional level, now all occupation has got a 6-digit code. For those occupation that starts with a 1 or a 2, meaning they are professional occupation, you must have proficient English. So what it means is if you're doing the IELTS test, you must get 7 each. Okay. In all other cases, then you just need to have competent English. So if you're doing the IELTS, you just need to get 6 each, and that's it. Okay. One thing to note though, the WA state government basically only requires you to prove your English if you are basically holding passport that is not from the UK, from Canada, from New Zealand, from the United States, or from Ireland. So if you're holding passports from the UK, Canada, New Zealand, United States, or Ireland, you actually do not need to sit for an English test to be eligible for WA state nomination. Okay, so obviously it's good news for citizens of those countries. But of course, for the majority of those people from other countries, yes, you must sit and have the English test. Okay. The other requirements in order to get WA state nomination is for the general Schedule 1 stream, where I put the red dot under, you will see that you must first have at least 1 year of Australian experience, or you must already have 3 years of overseas experience. Okay. So basically, what it is saying here is you must obviously have 3 years overseas experience, and you must also then be living in Australia under this work experience criteria in order to get WA state nominated. And you must also have a full-time employment contract for a minimum of 12 months in your closely related occupation. Under the stream Schedule 2, you will see that there is actually no work experience prior requirement. So all you need is you just need to have an employment contract where you have got a job offer for at least 12 months or more. So you do not need to have any prior employment experience. And then for the graduate stream, basically your work experience is you must have at least 6 months pay Australian experience in your occupation, or you must have 6 months of job offer. So as you can see, the graduate stream is much easier compared to Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. Now, I'm also going to explain the different occupations list for Schedule 1, Schedule 2, and the graduate stream a bit later. But at this point in time, if you look at the requirement for the graduate stream compared to Schedule 1 and Schedule 2, basically, you just need, for the graduate stream, you just need to show that you got either 6 months experience or you have a job offer for basically 6 months. And as long as you have your English and your occupation is on the list, you may be able to be eligible to get WA state nomination to apply for your PR, either for the 190 or the 491 visa. The other requirements is that basically for Schedule 1 and Schedule 2, there's no requirements because you do not need to have a qualification as such. I mean, obviously, you probably do it because you have to do a skill assessment. But in terms of just to get the WA state nomination, there's no requirement to have a qualification. But under the graduate stream, you must have either a certificate or a bachelor degree, depending on individual circumstance, in order to be eligible to apply to get WA state nomination. Okay. Now, before I move on further, I just want to basically explain that, look, this information that I'm presenting tonight is actually on the WA state government website, which a person, can go up and just Google. If you type in WA state sponsorship, you can actually get all this information from their website as well. Okay. Now, I've explained to you basically those are all the requirements that you need to get, to WA state nomination under those 3 different pathways, either the Schedule 1, Schedule 2, or the graduate stream. Now I'll move on to just to give you a quick rundown of the difference between the occupation either Schedule 1, Schedule 2, or the graduate stream. So as you can see on the slide here that I put up, this is the occupation list for the Schedule 1 stream. As you can see, most of the occupation here basically are mainly medical. Okay, so only those people who are working in this medical industry can use the Schedule 1 list to apply, okay, for the WA state nomination, either to apply for the 190 visa or to apply for the 491 visa. Okay, now under the Schedule 2 list, there is actually quite a lot of occupation for me to put up, but I can go through and just to basically have a show to you. Let me have a quick look. Okay, I think, but basically what happened is I'm just going to explain to you that there's quite a lot of occupation on the Schedule 2 list, and I'm just trying to bring up my internet to have a read through of the occupation, but for some reason my internet is actually not bringing up that slide, so I won't be able to tell you basically what occupation is on the Schedule 2 list at this stage, but what I can say is there's actually a lot of occupation there, including like accountants, engineers, cafe and restaurant manager, chef, and so forth. Okay, so if you want to have a look and see what occupation is on this individual different schedule, then I'll probably suggest just go online, go into the website, then you should be able to see them there. Okay. Okay, now, so basically, where do I start? A person will ask and say, look, I want to migrate, I'm intending to come to Australia to study, or I want to migrate to WA. What do I do, first of all? So the first thing is you must assess to see if your occupation is on Schedule 1, Schedule 2, or on the graduate list. When I mean your occupation, it means either the occupation that you're currently working in, or if you are intending to come to WA to study first. Let's say you're still quite young and you want to further your career and you want to get into a bachelor degree or something. And then obviously the first thing you need to do is to check on the graduate occupation list or the Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 list to see what occupation is on there. Okay, now, one thing is you have to remember is even if you decided to come to WA to study, you got a visa, you come here to study, the occupation list and the requirement from the state government changes all the time. So you need to obviously be mindful of this, and you have to constantly check back on the website to see whether or not there's any changes. Okay, because sometimes certain changes may basically deem you no longer eligible to apply for state government sponsorship, especially if your occupation has been removed from the list. Okay, and so like I said, if you Google WA state sponsorship or WA state nomination, you will come up with the website, okay, which is basically migration.wa.gov.au, and from there you can get all those information which I have actually discussed earlier in regards to the getting WA state nomination, and you can also see those individual occupation lists for Schedule 1, Schedule 2, as well as the graduate list. Okay. And also, before you start wanting to plan to migrate to Australia or ask for WA state nomination or even plan to apply for your student visa to come here to study, of course, it may be ideal to check first how many points you think you can achieve in future once you have resided in Australia, once you have studied, and once you have completed your study. Because if you start out with not having too many points, remember how I mentioned that you must get at least a minimum of 65 points, right? If you don't have many points to start off with, then if by the time you finish your study in WA, you still don't get enough points, then I would probably say you are going to be wasting your time and your money, right? So it pays to obviously check your points first and to have a preliminary assessment of your eligibility, okay? And also, it will be good to sit for an English test as well, just basically to see, where or what your English level is at. Remember, I said if your professional occupation, which starts with number 1 or 2, you must have proficient English. For any other occupation, you must have competent English. So it may be ideal to sit for English test to start with, just to see how your English level is. Okay, now, once you have determined basically what you're planning to come here to study, then you will look into basically, if you're talking about wanting to look at applying for state and nomination under Schedule 1 or Schedule 2, then you apply for a temporary visa that allows you to either study or work in WA. Then you come to WA and then try to apply for state nomination that way. If you're going to be looking at applying under the graduate pathway, which then you apply for student visa to come to WA to study at least a 2-year course, obviously checking to make sure that the course is going to be on the graduate list in order to be obviously eligible to apply for WA state sponsorship by the time you graduate. Again, things can change, requirement occupation can change, so something that a person may have to be mindful of. Okay. Now, basically, what I'm showing you here is the points from the last invitation from WA state government to show you what sort of point system a person must achieve in order to get a state government, WA state nomination. This is only for July. The points change all the time. So obviously that's entirely up to the WA state government to decide each month what sort of point a person must have in order for them to get an invitation from the state government. If you see at the moment, under the Schedule 1, a person must get about 70 points before they can get an invitation from the state government, provided their occupation is on the list, obviously. And then for Schedule 2, you're looking at 100 points. Now, it doesn't differentiate between 190 and a 491 visa. Again, there are different points depending on your age, your English, your work experience, and so forth, for each individual to determine how many points you get. But from July, the first invitation for this financial year, under the Schedule 2, even though there's a lot more occupation that the state government is going to sponsor, a person needs to get 100 points first. I would expect this to go down. So, those of you who look at it and say, whoa, I'm not going to get 100 points, but bear in mind that because it is just the first invitation, hopefully the points will actually go down, as the year progresses. Okay. Now, if you can see under the graduate stream, where I have put my pointer on, if you got a bachelor degree, or if you have a certificate 4, which you have studied and completed in WA after 2 years study, you need to get either 60 points or 75 points in order to get state nomination. Hence, that's why I mentioned earlier that the graduate pathway is actually quite attractive nowadays for someone who come to WA to study for 2 years and then try to get the state government sponsorship, because as you can see, the points are actually much lower compared to especially the Schedule 2. Okay, now, just going to give you a quick case example of 3 different individuals coming to WA to study and then to try to apply for the graduate pathway. Okay, so let's say a person is coming here and want to study a hospitality course and they want to become a cafe or restaurant manager, because cafe or restaurant manager, chef, as well as computer network and system engineer are all on the list. I'm just using this as an example. Okay, you can see that based on their age, they're 25 to 30 years old, and then for the computer network, I put this is just obviously an example, but someone who studied a computer network engineer is a little bit older. Okay, they're more than 33 years old, and then their English, putting them basically as having competent English, which you don't get points. But if you get proficient English, you get 10 points and so forth. Plus having Australian qualification, having, the Australian 1 year of Australian employment experience, and so forth, being single. And so, long story short, this is just giving a quick idea that if someone comes to Australia to study, for example, if they want to come in to study cafe or restaurant manager, this person is single, is between 25 to 32 years old, and they come to Australia after they finish a study, they work for 1 year, then they may be able to apply for get WA state nomination based on the current requirement, because the total points they can get is either 75 points for the 190 or 85 for the 491 visa. Okay. Remember on my slide before, basically I was saying that the bachelor degree, you need to get 60 points. And for certificate 4, you need to get 75 points, right? Now, I do not know why the bachelor degree, this is what I got from the state government, where it says 60 points, because by right, you're supposed to get 65 points. So I'm not sure whether or not there is an error there or whatever, but let's assume that you must get 65 points. So based on that, if someone comes to Australia to study a hospitality course to become a restaurant manager, for example, they can still get state nomination after they graduate, assuming that cafe and restaurant manager is still on the list and the requirement doesn't change. And that's the same as a chef. If a person come in and want to study hospitality to work as a chef, and they're single, they're between, between 25 to 32 years old, and they only have competent English. They also work and study here for 1 year. Then at the total they can get is 70 or 80 points, still qualifies them to apply for state nomination. So I'm just using these 3 examples just to show that, it could be easier for someone who basically wants to migrate, but don't have the option so far because they're not running a business, they're not in a highly skilled employment, and they want to further the study, and that's why they decide to come to WA to study for 2 years, and then use this as a pathway where perhaps they may be able to apply for the PR visa being sponsored by the Australian state government. Okay, so look, that is basically in summary of how a WA state government, WA state nomination works. So that probably comes to the end of my presentation. You see on the last slide, that's just my contact. You have got my email address there, my mobile, and my contact. And I've got my QR code there, which you can use your WeChat to scan, which you can then get hold of me, and you can, be welcome to come to me and ask, for me to give you a preliminary assessment of whether or not, you can qualify with your intention, what you intend to do in future to come to WA to study or whatever. Okay, so don't forget to mention the code word "Enjoy Life" to basically receive a free 30 minutes over the telephone consultation. Okay, so now I'll pass you back to Leanne, and thanks again to Leanne for hosting. Leanne, if you have any question from what I've spoken so far, I know it's a little bit dry, you might be falling asleep. So without any further delay, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you so much, Kenny. So comprehensive. And this topic is actually very close to my heart because skill migration, this is how I ended up here in Perth. So like everyone else, I came here to study 20 plus years ago. So yeah, I'm old. So I came here to study without knowing all these point things or whatever. Never looked up about migration, PR or whatsoever. I know back then, I think we don't have the intention that, who knows, one day I'll end up here. So I came here to study, finished my study, decided to stay and thought, maybe I'll get some work experience first before I go back to my home country. And then, so let's go try apply for PR. I think the time system probably is a little bit easier. I think because my occupation back then is in healthcare, and on top of it, so I got extra point for a lot of things. And then being young and single as well. Yay! So if you want to get PR here, young and single, So that is the way it
That would be a
works.
family visa option. That is something that it wasn't covered tonight, but that's something that I'll be more than happy to explain and discuss that in another session.
Of course, yeah. I think the other things that I just noticed that from your presentation is the regional. I know Perth has been on and off being classified as different things. So I think it's good things that now we are being classified as regional. So that
Yes, that's right. So because the fact that Perth is now considered as regional, so obviously the 491 visa is quite attractive because not everyone is eligible to apply for the 190, or the state government sometimes they have a higher requirement to nominate a person for the 190 compared to the 491. So the 491 sometimes could be easier. So because Perth is being regional, it basically improved the chances to be nominated by the state government if the occupation is on the list. And because, see, the definition of regional for WA includes Perth, which is good. If you're talking about regional Victoria, for example, it doesn't include Melbourne. So if you get a job offer in Melbourne, you cannot get sponsored under the 190 visa. But in WA, if you get a job offer in Perth, which is one of the requirements, you must have a job offer. If under the graduate stream, you get 6 months job offer, or under Schedule 1 and Schedule 2, you get a 12-month job offer. If you get a job offer in Perth, then you can be considered to apply under the 190 or the 491 visa.
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah. Kenny, I'm aware that there's few questions coming through now, so I will pop that question through as we go. I noticed that with skill migration, like what I said before, younger better. And what happened for people that who are over 45 years old? They're doomed.
So unfortunately, because obviously skill migration is point tested, right? So if you are over, let's just say don't even say 45. If you're over 39 years old, then the chances of you getting to be able to apply for PR visa is actually going to be much harder because you get less points for your age. Okay. If you're over 45 years old, no, you don't have the chance to apply for PR visa and skill migration anymore because unfortunately the cutoff age for skill migration is 45 years old. And that's the same as employer-sponsored visa as well.
Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, time is ticking. So try to get it before 45. I'm sure there is other visa type that you can consider if you are over 45, but that is not the scoop that we're going to discuss today. So we'll make another time and we'll have either Kenny or another agent come back to explain about the different type of visa because it's very complicated. All right. And then the graduate stream, you mentioned that they have to study here for 2 years. So, for example, for people who are doing the twinning program where they spend some time in overseas campus, for example, Malaysia campus for Curtin universities, so they have to do 2 years in Perth, isn't it?
That is correct. Physically, they must spend 2 years in Australia. Unfortunately, that is a state requirement.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. Okay. What about is there any? I know that there is a requirement that people must have job offer for minimum of 12 months. Is there any category or visa or job type that doesn't require that, or it's kind of like a compulsory that?
Okay. Now, if you're talking about state nomination for WA state nomination under the skill pathway for Schedule 1 and Schedule 2, you must have the job offer. You cannot get away from that. Under the graduate pathway, you either show that you have done 6 months of work experience in Australia, not necessarily in WA, or you have 6 months of job offer in WA. Okay. So unfortunately, the job offer is. Apart from the graduate stream, for the Schedule 1 and Schedule 2, you must have that job offer.
So if you can't find anyone willing to give you that job offer, basically, you
will not be able to apply for the WA state nomination without.
Okay, so you're not able to do it completely.
That is right. That is right. Yeah.
And I have one really random question that I
Mm.
know the answer, where I will still bring it up and let people listen from the expert. Because quite often, especially when I go overseas to do roadshow and bring properties to overseas, I always have people come and ask me if they buy a properties in Australia, will that
Yep.
lead them to direct migration or easier for them to get visa, things like that? You know the answer.
I knew,
Yeah.
yeah, I knew you were gonna ask that. Okay. Yes.
I
No.
would love to tell
Okay.
them yes, but
Unfortunately, it is a common myth that a lot of people think that, look,
Mm,
if I purchase a property in Australia, then I can
mm,
basically apply to get my PR. No, it doesn't
yeah,
work that way.
no.
Some visa, such as the business visa,
Mm,
it may require you to purchase a property under certain states. So, for
yeah.
example, WA, if you want to get WA state sponsorship for the business visa, you must purchase a property in WA, and
Mm-hmm.
that will basically facilitate by getting the state government nomination. That is it. That's got nothing to do with your eligibility to apply for PR visa, because getting a state nomination is one thing. Getting a PR visa granted by the immigration department is another matter. Of course,
Mm,
some occupation, some visa is state nomination visa. You need that state nomination in order to apply and to be granted the visa by immigration department. But basically, to your question, no. If you purchase a
mm-hmm.
property, it doesn't automatically entitles you to apply to get a PR in Australia. You still have to go through each of the visa requirements in order to satisfy the requirement before you can get the visa.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for clarifying that. So everyone, so that is the answer from Kenny. But talking about properties, buying properties, and the whole visa things, it brings
Mm,
me back to the story that my dad always talk about. Because we came here as an overseas student. My
mm,
dad now look, he always said, if only I knew back then, I will buy properties here. I mean, back then, 20 plus years ago, investing in Australia is uncommon. We never heard of, and maybe people are doing just that we never heard of. So me and my sister, all of us came here to study. Back then, three of us were here, and we were renting, paying lots of rent. And I remember at that time, me and Lily, we are renting an apartment in Vic Park. And that time, the caretaker told us that we should invest, buy that property instead of paying rent. That property only cost 75,000 back then. It was so
cool.
good, paying like $80 per week rent. Still quite cheap then, yeah. Things has changed. So now looking back 25 years later, my dad always said, if only if I know how to, and I bought that property, because today that property costs 280 minimum. It's an apartment, 280,000, and he could have made 200,000 profit. That is more than enough to cover all our school fee, and and then we got the properties to live in for free. So anyway, in short, that's the reason why I think about the properties, because my dad always talk about that when we when people ask whether we need to buy properties in Australia. Anyway, I'm aware that the time is ending soon, and we probably won't be able to answer any more question. Or we have a little message here. I didn't manage to read out. So, yeah, thank you for sharing. What is the chance of kids to migrate, assuming the adult is eligible and all points are met? Olivia, thank you for your question. Because we are running out of time. I'm not sure if you managed to get Kenny contact detail. If not, we will take your contact detail and I'll pass to Kenny, so you can ask Kenny directly. Because I think all the what's the word? Everyone is different. Oh, thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah. So everyone is different. The situation is different and individual. So Kenny has kindly offered a complimentary 30 minutes over the phone consultation. So if you have any question about migration, which I think a lot of people would like to find out now, looking at the COVID situation or planning ahead for the children, yeah. So Kenny contact detail is here. Feel free to get in touch with him.
Yes. Yeah. Olivia, just feel free to give me get in touch with me, so then I can answer your query, because obviously, due to the sensitive nature of individual person and the family background, obviously this kind of issue we rather discuss it, privately rather in the public domain. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. We hit our 1 hour, so I think we will get logged out soon. So thank you once again, Kenny, for taking the time to join us tonight and share your wealth of knowledge with us about migration. Things
Thank
has
you.
certainly changed a lot. And yes, so appreciate your time. Yeah.
No problem.
Is
Thank
there
you.
anything else that you want to add in before we end?
No, I think basically, like I said, because of just to show a token of appreciation, so if those who wants to basically inquire or for me to assess their migration eligibility, so just basically get in contact with me and then just mention enjoy live, obviously as part of GYIQI, and I'll be happy to provide a 30 minutes over the telephone consultation.
Fantastic.
And
Thank you
thank you
so
again.
much.
Thank you, Lian, and again to Lily, and also to GYIQI. Thank you.
Have a great evening, everyone, and we shall see you in 2 weeks' time. So the next one that's coming up, we are going to talk about feng shui. I think that is a very interesting topic to many people. So whether you believe or you don't believe, but it just is something extra knowledge or interesting things to find out. So I shall see you in 2 weeks' time. Thank you once again, Kenny. Goodbye, everyone. Have a great one.